3 counties, 24 cities, working together, accomplishing more than any of us could alone. Whether your roots run generations deep, or you recently moved to Greater Portland, you are a part of Metro, the nation's only regional government elected by the people. Planning for the future, preserving what we love. Let's keep our region thriving for decades to come.
I'm Jason, and I'm an event production manager. Here at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, safety is our #1 priority, not only for our guests, but for our staff members. I'm at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairway to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk, and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the reception desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at Portland 5.
Okay, I'm going to declare a quorum and call the Metro Council work session to order, and ask our clerk, Georgia Langer, to call the roll for attendance.
Yes. Councilor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilor Nolan.
Present.
Councilor Lewis.
Present.
Council President Peterson is excused today. Councilor Simpson should be joining us right now. Hi, Councilor Simpson. And Deputy Council President Wong.
Present, thank you. Okay, I'm going to shift the agenda around slightly because we have a meaty topic, and we have our zoo team here. So we're going to ask our zoo team to come up to provide an update on their progress of strategic priorities. And we have Heidi Ron, the zoo director, to share the update.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for accommodating us on the schedule today. So we have a lot going on at the zoo, and I wanted just to provide some context and give you an update. Georgia, can we have the handouts that are next to you, please? Thank you. I'm going to respond a little bit on our workplace culture and the things that we continue to do to advance that. I'm going to give you an update on our strategic plan implementation. And that includes transforming the campus. And then I'm going to get you up to speed on what's going on with AZA accreditation. So a few things I just want to keep you in the loop on. First and foremost, I want to reply a little bit and make sure you know that I am committed, our whole team is committed to advancing our workplace culture in terms of reporting. This came up as a need for continuous improvement last week due to the auditor's hotline report on conflict of interest and ethics policy. And I want you guys to hear directly from me that we want to make sure our employees feel confident in reporting any concerns. We do measure that through our employee engagement survey every year, and we have data that shows that they have significantly improved their confidence in reporting. That is a top priority to us. We take accountability for that, and please know that we will continue to make great strides in that area. So, strategic plan implementation. You approved our strategic plan almost a year ago, so this is the document in front of you, the green one. This is a summary of our strategic plan. It's driving our direction for the next 3 years. And approving it almost a year ago, I just want to give you some highlights of where we're at. You also have, one of our biggest focuses and priorities is the conservation of species recovery. You have our very first ever conservation impact report in front of you, I believe. And that kind of summarizes the work we're doing to protect endangered species and work both locally and globally for that. I am very proud that we've added one additional species. Our goal is to add 2. We're working on what that second one would be, but that new species is the Mazama newt. As you know, we have some of the final remaining Mazama newts that were pulled out of Crater Lake to help breed the species, while the Park Service works to eradicate their competition. But I want to give a big shout out here. Our government affairs and policy team has worked to bring more funding in for conservation of endangered species. So we have received more federal funding and will continue to do so for condor recovery. That's allowed us to invest in our offsite facility and in our operations. So kudos to the GAPD team for helping us with that. One of our other priorities is enhancing the zoo experience. We had the highest attendance ever for Zoo Lights this year, and that is because of continuous reinvestment in the campus and making sure that we're meeting our guests' needs. So, and then we continue to update the campus around all the different areas to make sure our guests are having a good time and the animals have what they need. Coming up, what we're going to be focusing on is parking. You know, it's one of our top challenges, and we continue to have conversations with the city who runs the lot and Explore Washington Park, who manages the services, to make sure our visitors have what they need for parking convenience and transit. And we've had a great partnership with our Metro Regional Transit Options Program to help support folks taking transit to the zoo. The other thing we're doing is continuing to reinvest in the zoo, and that goes to transforming the campus. So a big thing we have going on right now, I'm going to go over some non-bond funded projects we're doing, so you're aware of what's happening up there. We continue to advance our sustainability investments. We've added solar to our gift shop roof at the front entrance. We've upgraded our ballroom and our workspaces and our front Cascade Crest building. And we're continuing to work on the Children's Museum property acquisition. We're in conversations with the city to adjust our property line to include the former Children's Museum site. If anything comes up in this final round of due diligence or land use that is a major risk for us, we will come back to you. We have received your direction to proceed with that procurement, so we are continuing down that path. And as you know, recently you authorized the procurement of a new electric train. We're trying to enhance our train assets to make sure we can navigate with this asset into the future. Bond construction. So we have started construction on campus. We started right after Zoo Lights wrapped up, and we are following the bond implementation plan that council approved as part of the campus plan in 2024. This document is in front of you, and it outlines the sequence, this high-level scoping, and the cost estimates for each project. You approved this plan in September of 2024, and it drives the work that we're doing and we're implementing on campus. The first projects in this implementation plan are updates to the front entry and exit experience and the East Hub plazas, and that is between Polar Passage and Elephant Lands. We heard from our guests that they want shade, protection from the elements, and places to sit and rest. And the campus plan outlined updates to the entry and exit and plaza experience to provide better flow. Thank you, your handout is coming your way. Shade canopies, seating, and framed views of the mountain goats. You may recall that there were a few conceptual designs in the campus plan that offered sketches of different types of structures at the front entrance. Once we began the actual design process and brought an architect on board for these projects, we were able to test the functionality of these concepts. The design team mocked up a series of shade structures down the center of the entrance. But that started to impede guest flow. And we weren't providing consistent cover from the elements. We weren't offering places to sit and rest. And it was challenging to integrate that structure. On top of that, the cost estimate for that structure or those structures alone was more than the full allocated $19 million for all of these projects, sub-projects combined. So as a result, we refined the design in order to meet the goals of the campus plan and what was approved in terms of scope and needs for our visitors. We will be adding shelter at the front entrance onto the existing Cascade Crest building that will allow guests to have a place to relax, to wait for their party, to eat. We'll also have it for events, provides shade and shelter, and meets the expectations from our community. In addition, we are going to be updating the front entrance and exit to be more accessible and welcoming to visitors while not taking away from that beautiful view, which a large structure was starting to do. We are also building the East Plaza shelters. Those are the East Hub shelters, both at Polar Plaza and Elephant Plaza. You may recall if you're walking through, we often have temporary white tents up for those spaces. Those were both approved in the campus plan and will be getting invested as part of these first projects. All of these are going to help with accessibility for visitors And they will also meet Metro Sustainable Building and Sites policy and help support our energy and water reduction. Next up on project design is Coastal Shores, as you can see in the sequencing of project. We will start designing that this summer, and that is new habitats for sea otters, harbor seals, and Humboldt penguins. That is our major animal project. We started with some smaller projects first while we continue to build the team and get going with the bond. So I just want to reiterate that while the campus plan guides our future, the artistic elements in there are not meant to be taken literally. They do provide guidance, but this is a high-level holistic concept of how the campus will be laid out. We are following the implementation plan that you have in front of you. If things change from the sequence or scope that was outlined in the campus plan, we will come back to you for those conversations. Finally, we have AZA accreditation coming up. This week, our application is due. Every 5 years, we get accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. We have many regulatory bodies, OSHA, USDA, AZA. AZA is the most comprehensive. They look at everything. They look at top to bottom of our operations, our educational programs, our keeper training, our veterinary programs, financial stability, our governance, our risk management, and our visitor services. We've been accredited continuously for 50 years. We hope to maintain that. That allows us the opportunity to partner with 200 other accredited zoos and aquariums when we want to move animals around. It gives us the gold standard and community trust, and it keeps us improving and advancing our work based on best practices. It's a huge lift. We are submitting about 300 documents. We answer about 250 questions, and we are very fortunate that we have Rachel Richardson, our Deputy Director of Animal Care, who is here with us today, and she is an inspector. She goes around and inspects other zoos and aquariums. She's on our team, and she has really dialed our accreditation process. So the accrediting inspectors will likely come out in May, likely the week of May 26th. And they will likely want to meet with some of you, as well as Metro administrative leadership. And so they will want to know from you how you support the zoo and the governance structure that we have set in place. Is it working? And we'll keep you posted as we plan these things, how to engage you. The other thing we have going on with AZA is hosting. We are hosting the major conference in late September here at the Convention Center in the Oregon Zoo. We'll have 3,000 zoo and aquarium professionals attending to join us, and we are hosting our launch party at OMSI, which will be a really fun night. And we will find ways to include you in that process as well. We estimate the economic impact of hosting this conference is close to $4 million for our region. So we will continue to identify ways to keep you informed, posted, and included in all of these activities. That's what I got for you today. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Heidi. We'll have exciting updates there. Open up for questions or comments. Let's go for Councilor Rosenthal.
Just a quick question. First of all, you said your construction is starting. Is that starting on the coastal shores as well as the, and then the second question is, it seems like we just went through AZA certification 9 months ago.
Comes by fast. That wasn't 9 months ago. AZA accreditation is every 5 years. We had provisional accreditation for a year, so it was basically kind of holding things stable and then having to go back again. So it feels like it was sooner, but it's every 5 years. Just comes around fast.
Okay.
Yeah, Coastal Shores construction has not started. Coastal Shores design is about to get started. So we'll go through the design phase first, and then we'll start construction after that.
And you said we were starting construction on something.
The front entrance and the plaza shelters that are at the front entrance and the east hub, which is over by Polar Passage and Elephant Lands.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilor Lewis. Oh, sorry, were you
Sure, thank you so much. Very appreciative of the update, and I've been at the zoo lately, so I've seen the construction equipment on site. And I will just say the work that we as council have to do to continue to be leaders in this space for the AZA to see where we do have attention. And frankly, that's in the bond space and the investment space, but then also leaving habitat conservation and animal wellness purely in your operational space. I think that's really important for us to strike that balance and really super document that so it's not a question through accreditation. I look forward to hosting. I look forward to sharing with other zoos across the country what it looks like when a community says yes for the conservation work that we're able to do. So I do hope that you'll continue to engage us not only with bond implementation, but also with the responsibilities of hosting, since there are so many different municipalities, jurisdictions, counties who do zoo work. I think it's important for us from the government side to get to tell our story as well. So thank you, Heidi.
Thank you. I will add to that, our animal welfare manager, animal well-being manager, is working actively to make sure that we are navigating how we do construction around animals and using that data and information from both the keepers and the managers of what we need to make sure our animals are doing well during this process. We fully agree with that commitment.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Just want to thank you for coming and providing these updates. I'm feeling a lot of confidence in where we're headed, and really thrilled to be working with the Zoo Bond Oversight Committee on this as well. So I think we got a lot of eyes on it, and really looking forward to a 3,000 person party.
Yeah,
coming up. Yeah.
Thank you for your support.
Thanks for the updates.
Might I just add one quick follow-up? When do we expect the design for the coastal shores to be complete? You said you're just starting design.
Yeah, we'll start design this summer. Design will take about a year? About 18 months. That is a huge project. That is why we started with some simple structures in the beginning. So it'll take quite some time.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our presentation for the day, the discussion on draft resolution number 26-5567 for the purpose of adopting oversight and accountability measures and agenda priorities for the Supportive Housing Services Regional Policy and Oversight Committee. Today, we will discuss and provide feedback on this resolution to prepare for potential adoption consideration in March. Councilor Gonzalez and I have put this resolution for consideration as a companion to the resolution adopted by Council back in December. This draft expands on the scope of the newly formed SHS Regional Policy and Oversight Committee, or RPOC, setting clear expectations around what policy outcomes should be included as part of the committee's work plan. These policy outcomes come out of continued discussions Councilor Gonzalez and I have had with community stakeholders from the Portland Metro Chamber and community coalitions. They also outline a set of requirements I strongly believe must be achieved by the dates specified in the draft resolution in order for the council to consider any referral of a future funding extension for SHS. What we've envisioned here for this resolution is completing a narrative of what our role is as a council regarding oversight of the program. The narrative in the simplest terms is that we set clear regional KPIs and KEIs, we invest in achieving them, we deploy a continuous improvement framework to keep each other accountable, and if there are issues, we have concise ways to quickly resolve them. At a high level, these policy outcomes include, first, developing regional performance metrics in a dashboard with an emphasis on including inflow and outflow metrics into KEIs. In the resolution, it stipulates RPOC maintaining this dashboard, but this should be done with Metro in partnership and with also our counties. We then hope to develop and recommend a regional investment fund governance and alignment framework for Metro Council to consider for adoption by the end of May of 2028. We will also develop and recommend a regional continuous improvement framework for Metro Council consideration and adoption. We'll develop a recommendation for a regional funding framework for performance accountability, also by the end of May 2028. And we'll also develop and recommend a regional accountability and corrective action framework. To offer a context on these outcomes, we'd like to clearly define inflow and outflow as a metric of success And that identifies entries into the system and exits out and into stable, permanent, supportive housing. We've all heard from stakeholders about the importance of incorporating a continuous improvement framework adopted unilaterally by every county using methodologies like LEAN, with like policy items around the RIF framework and regional funding framework with performance accountabilities, that I believe having that framework in place over the next couple of years will set us up for further conversations with the public. And finally, the last policy outcome is we have to have and clarify existing corrective action language that is too open for interpretation. We need to clearly define that process in which our partners enter a corrective action, what specific and more punitive outcomes would occur, and how do they come out of it. So colleagues, you've had a few days to sit on this draft resolution, and I know some of you have come prepared with amendments, which we welcome, and we welcome discussion of this proposal. We do have housing staff available here for any technical questions, but I want to be clear that this is a draft by Councilor Gonzalez and myself, and we've weighed a lot of the political and policy dynamics behind it. So I'd like to kick off the discussion with Councilor Gonzalez to add any additional insights.
Thank you, Councilor Wong. Just thank you so much for your leadership in developing the draft resolution. Your background and history as an attorney truly shine here. You're brilliant. And ultimately, just council, something that we really wanted to work on here was with the with our new oversight committee kicking off soon, we really wanted to focus on building trust in this regional program and creating a pathway for us to truly meet the expectations that we set with the voters and understanding what is required not just of us but our partners in ensuring that these dollars are broadcasting the message, the success, and the progress that we know we expect. I am in favor of this resolution because I think it provides clear direction and policy. As we start to enter our conversation here, to me it was very important to mention, and Councilor Huang alluded to this, the conditions and the outcomes that we look to balance. And I think it's important to, again, highlight that this resolution is a companion to the work plan that we adopted in December for RPOC. And we wanted to not be too heavy-handed in shifting the entire mission of the measure or of the oversight committee, recognizing that this oversight committee also needs to develop a sense of trust in their own work plan and that we have there. So I think we have this responsibility to be balanced. We decided to not go to the ballot to achieve some of these more broader reforms that we were hoping for, and therefore we are working within the limitations of the existing program that we have. So I want to acknowledge that tension very clearly, and as we talk about amendments, I will be connecting back to that theme of balance and what we've agreed to with this new oversight structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. Okay, well, let's jump into the discussion. I'm glad we have this work session. That's exactly what it's designed for. So, questions, feedback, comments? Perfect as is? No? Okay. Councilor Rosenthal.
I was waiting for other hands to go up, but I'll start. First of all, I want to say that I think that there's a great deal of work, of good work here, and a lot of thoughtful consideration that's gone into developing this resolution. I have 5 pages of comments and recommendations of changes, some of which just a lot of it's to clarify language and sequencing and things like that. I'll make a comment that I always make. When you have that many whereases, it's always good to letter them so you don't have to, so it's easy to refer to them, but that's another matter. I have I haven't had a chance to discuss this or to submit these at this point in time because there's a lot to unpack, but I do have 3 major points, or I wouldn't say major, but significant points that I want to make. First of all, in some of the things where we talk about we refer to, regional outcome system effectiveness and address gaps identified through performance data. That's in number 4. I think we sometimes need to reassert the fact that this is all human-based. And in a couple places, I've suggested that we make specific reference to the goal is to improve outcomes for people who are experiencing or potential to experience homelessness, and not put it in bureaucratic terms. So I think that's one thing. I think we're also missing a resolution that would give the committee authority to evaluate its own structure and its own effectiveness, and I think that that is not specifically addressed. That would be one that I would suggest adding an amendment. I liked Councilor Nolan's one of amendment, although I suggested alternative wording to that. But probably the biggest concern I have is that the way it's written continuously, there seems to be an assumption that the RPAC is going to be a creative functioning organization. And for example, number 3, 4 says, SHS RPAC shall develop and recommend. For example, this is the continuous improvement capacity. The majority on this committee will be political appointees, and then there will be a small but not entirely representative group of stakeholders. It is expecting an awful lot for them to be a creative force in developing things for which they're not in expertise. In many cases, obviously, and maybe the wording just needs to be clearer, that Metro staff will be developing many of these things or recommending these things, or in many cases they will be reviewing, for example, continuous improvement documents or potential things or potential continuous improvement plans that already exist, and they may be making recommendations, but it is hard to imagine that they will be developing these things. If you just plot out how long they're going to exist with the timelines, they won't have the time. Unless they're going to be meeting for 12 hours a day for 3 times a month. It's just going to be very difficult. So I think it has to be very clear as to who is actually, for example, continuous improvement, who is developing that, or are they using existing models? When it comes to, for example, corrective action programs, who is going to be developing that? Our staff already has quite a bit of expertise in developing those, but go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. I mean, I might just call on Marisa to give us a basic government 101 about when we put together a committee, what does it mean for staff to staff a committee, and like who's actually doing the work. I think that's just it's not just this new committee, but just every Metro committee, and it's not the actual chair and the committee members drafting the legislation. They're providing feedback but can you just talk to us about that?
Sure. Good morning, Council. It's good to see you all. We have a variety of different types of committees at Metro, but generally speaking, we assign staff to support them, whether they're an advisory committee to council, whether they are a council committee as part of your legislative process. But generally speaking, staff would, take high-level direction from the chairs of the committees or the consensus of the committee, do background research, bring back detailed language or information, and then in an iterative process for approval. Is that the kind of, there's variations from there, but generally that's the cycle, which is why, staff our office likes to have council direction to form and consensus support for new committees and new work, because it is quite a bit of time to support committee work.
Yeah, thanks.
And Councilor Rosenthal, thank you for your feedback. I think that's all much appreciated. But I think we can do more to add some human element to the whereases. I like that. And I think on the continuous improvement piece, I think the intent here is that there is different community or continuous improvement frameworks actually already being practiced. And what we'd like to do is more systematize and regionalize it. So it's not necessarily creating a new system. I think there are great ones. We've talked about Lean, we've talked about all these other systems that are happening in different places, but how do we do that on a regional scale? and adopting it so that we're all using that same framework. So I don't think it's reinventing the wheel. I think it's actually like take the wheel that's working and making sure that we're all on the same car, if that analogy works. Does that get to what you're asking about?
Well, I'm not exactly sure that addresses my concerns, but again, we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this in more detail, so I'm just giving a broad overview.
I think this is our opportunity to discuss it, though, so I would
Right.
welcome all of the things that you have.
Yeah. And we also have another
But I think,
actual resolution in a couple of weeks to have more conversation, but this is the start, yes.
like I said, I think it's moving in the right direction. And I think we should not be precipitous in coming up with something with wording that we may come back to restrict us or set the wrong sort of precedence for the committee beforehand. My personal view is that committee is, well, for example, with one of the recommendations, and I haven't submitted this formally, is a recommendation to include the provision that they will have the ability or should require them to evaluate their structure and to propose subcommittees, et cetera, from time to time. That is not in the existing one, because I think that the committee is likely to change over time. And it may find that it's well-suited for doing some of the things that you have written here, most of which I agree with in principle. It's just a question of how it's specified. So I think that that's something that needs to be added. And like I said, I think we need to make sure that we continually reinforce the fact that this is human-centered, not process-centered. And sometimes you read this and it reads, it doesn't really address the human nature of it in some sense. So those are nuances, not dealing with the overall intent of the process. For example, we could have either a whereas or some other therefore that says that the committee will work entirely through Metro housing staff. And that isn't specifically clarified in this thing. That might be a good idea, or maybe we want to reword that, for example. For example, one of the amendments I would suggest is wording, for example, in the developing of the corrective action programs. First of all, corrective actions are sort of interesting because there's two layers of corrective actions. A county could not meet its goals, its KP, well, there's another issue I'd get to. The county might not meet its KPIs for two reasons. One is because malfeasance on their part that requires corrective action, or because malfeasance on the part of the people who are providing the services, the service providers. Those are both handled differently because each county will have its own structures and procedures for handling non-compliance with contracts. And this committee will not probably, in some cases it might, but in general, it's not going to be reviewing the contracts for the counties have with the shareholders that they provide. So there's two layers there. They will be reviewing the compliance. And then my point in the amendment that I'll submit says that really Metro staff, which has the most experience in developing corrective action programs and including escalations, they should be responsible for presenting a corrective action plan and corrective actions guidance to the committee for review and comment and then feedback, rather than asking the committee to develop something. I mean, for example, the counties are all going to have different views on what a corrective action plan should be. So if we start from scratch, we're going to end up with the chaos that we've already worked our way through. And I give our staff great credit for having labored very intensely over the last 2 or 3 years to try and resolve some of these differences. And they've recognized that we've had some limitations when it comes to corrective action. We didn't have it was, let's just say it wasn't fully formed when we first passed the measure. So I think that this is an area that's going to require considerable attention. And
Can I share some thoughts? Sure. Yeah, I mean, so you talked about a little bit about the governance piece, and then I want to come back to the staffing piece. The reason I asked Marisa is this is a Metro committee that will be staffed by Metro staff, right? Like the work plan, the studies, those things will be led by the entire Metro SHS team. Absolutely. And I think that is if not, maybe not codified here, but pretty well codified in the December resolution that we adopted. So I just kind of feel like there's a bit of a redundancy there because it's implied and assumed. And again, it's a companion to the December work plan. I mean, some personal thoughts and just on the governance bit. I mean, we had a significant amount of conversations on governance. I think this council disagreed, deliberated pretty significantly for a long time on what the governance should look like. The council voted and adopted the format that we have. I know at that time you brought up similar feedback about the governance aspects, and I think the council ultimately did not include that in the broader thing that we adopted. So I think that, to me, what's important is that this is building off of a huge amount of work that we already did late last year, and my hope is not that we have to relitigate all of the things that we've already agreed on, and we've agreed to disagree on some things. I understand that, but I'm hoping that we can kind of continue to build and build some of that momentum with the measure, so that the housing team and RPOC has clear direction and guidance about what our expectations are the next 3 years.
And maybe Liam and Yesenia, do you want to just come up for some technical questions, I think, on committee structure? And I just want to be sure that Councilor Rosenthal's concerns are being addressed with staff. So would the RPOC committee be able to recommend subcommittees? I think we've already had discussions on subcommittees, so I just want to be sure that, we're not closing that off and that there's a process for that. And then also, I want to be clear also that staff would help flesh out what it means to have a corrective action plan. And for me, it was like, we've used it once and we kind of did it while we were building it, and we weren't sure like when metrics were met and how, when you're off corrective action plan. So I want it to be a valuable tool. And what could staff do to help us, make sure that there's a commonly understood policy and procedure around what a corrective action plan means. So those are two questions I heard from Councilor Rosenthal, if you want to add anything from the staff.
Sir, what?
Those are two questions I synthesized from your comments to them. We're asking the staff on.
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. For the record, Liam Frost, he, him, his pronouns, interim housing director for Metro. And thanks for the questions, Councilor Rosenthal. To the first one, I don't believe that I've ever staffed a committee at the City of Portland, Multnomah County, or Metro wherein the staff does not carry the work for the volunteer-based committee members. When I read the proposed language, it felt not just intuitive to me, but as a common practice that housing staff would be the primary implementers of this work, and then working with our county partners to do that. I can't see an alternative to that for the reasons that you put forth, not only because the non-elected officials are volunteer-based, but the elected officials themselves have very busy schedules. So I think it's just the way in which a public committee works, and the committees at Metro works as well. I think when it comes to the correction action plan aspect of this, I'll be quick, but it's been a unique experience for us here at Metro because we are governed by the intergovernmental agreements with each of the 3 counties. The corrective action plan provision in the IGA requires Metro to, let me choose my words very carefully here. Metro, in consultation with the Oversight Committee and Council, requires the jurisdictional partner to develop a corrective action plan. I can't get that out for some reason. And so because of that, our responsibility is to work with the committee, work with council, then to say, we want to see these results from your corrective action plan. It's a little unusual compared to most funders. I will say that I'm grateful for Councillor Wong bringing this to the, in a resolution. I think it's also feedback we've gotten from Auditor Evans in the past too, to have a more consistent corrective action plan process. I will say for the record that it has to be balanced. Each action that we are trying to correct for is a unique action. They're not across the board. So there needs to be some flexibility baked in there, but Yesenia and I have actually talked about what are the consistent points that will be the same no matter what? And then where do we need to leave some flexibility? So this pushes us in a direction with which we can define consistency, but also we want to retain some flexibility in there as well.
Deputy Council President, if I could just double down on that, I think because this is a relatively novel program with so many complex actors in the system, having that high-level framework and criteria, I think, is important, but also maintaining that flexibility for unforeseen, unknown unknowns that could come up. And that's a balance that we've talked about in our audit responses. It's a balance that, that we're talking about here. But I think it's important as the governing body to have that flexibility because sometimes things happen and we're like, didn't think that could happen, but here we are, and we need to be able to respond.
And I just want to be clear, no one's on a corrective action plan, but I would like the policies and procedures to be understood by everyone should that tool need to be used.
Yes.
Can you also just talk really briefly about the ability to charter subcommittees?
Oh, sorry.
As was just read.
I'm looking at our chief attorney, Carrie McLeod.
Thank you, Councillor Huang and Council. With respect to generals, so when we say subcommittees, subcommittees mean a subset of the committee that's formed. And so our code has general provisions that govern and direct how committees can do that. They can only essentially have those that are temporary in nature. They can't exceed more than 1 year unless council approves budgeting for that. And really the reason for that is exactly this staff interplay that you've all been talking about. Because those committees require staff to really do the work, council needs to have a line of sight into those. If the desire of or recommendation of the Supportive Housing Services Regional Policy Oversight Committee and council was to create a technical advisory committee or some other separate committee, that would take separate council action. This committee cannot do it of its own accord. That's similar in structure to what we have for technical advisory committees that advise JPAC or MPAC. And again, it is council sort of having that line of sight over the advice that it's seeking.
Thank you. And we've already had conversations with council around the technical advisory committee or idea. I think
that's right. We've had conversations with you, I think, just last month when I was returning to report back on that. And I think at this point in the process, it's too early to say we will require this subcommittee for this purpose, or we will want to create a new work group even. In conversations with Councillor Gonzalez-Lewis and President Peterson, we've also determined that over the coming 6 months, 6 to 9 months, there's going to be a tremendous amount of work. So we don't want to preclude the committee from providing direction around what items they want to prioritize and whether a subcommittee might be more appropriate or not. So that's where we're at right now.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. First, I want to thank you all for bringing this forward. I think it's good legislation. I think much of it was under the legislative intent of what we passed at the end of the year. And I think some of it could have potentially been buried in a work plan or an administrative document that doesn't see the light of day. And I think clarity around our intent and our enthusiasm for these processes is really important. The one piece that I would add that I see as something I would like to add, and I don't have language drafted over a document to share with you today, and would be open to working with language if it looks like there's a path forward. I think adding a clarification that the Oversight Committee and Metro have complete control over the Regional Investment Fund, and therefore the RIFT funds this spring should stop going to the county and stay at Metro for better accounting and immediate use in area of highest need in accordance with the REC policy. And be open to working that language to make it achievable, understanding that there will be some friction there, but we absolutely have to say we have regional investments, we have regional priorities for this system. We can spend money on it as a council and as an oversight committee. So that would be my addition, and just reflecting back that I think this is, as base legislation, something I can support even if my other idea doesn't move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Certainly, it's my intent to bring the RIF back to central control at Metro as soon as possible. I think we've talked about that, and there are existing contracts funded by the RIF right now, which is why I set kind of a May of 2028 timeline to not kind of impact existing contracts. But the intent is certainly there to bring the RIF to make regional investments as soon as possible. But we'll have to open that piece up for conversation. Should we be more ambitious on the timeline and on the RIF, if that's possible? Or is this timeline okay? And maybe, Liam, you can talk about some of the considerations that we had on this, just so that set the stage for the councilors.
Thank you. And thanks for the suggestion there, Councillor Lewis. As Metro Housing Department staff, we're going to await Council's decision on how to move forward on this. Currently, our staff are hard at work on implementing the work plan that Council approved 2 months ago, which included developing a framework with our county partners around the RIF. You are correct, Councillor Wong, that funding from the RIF, and to remind everybody for the record, the RIF itself is 5% of each county's allocation. So each county receives an allocation from Metro. They are supposed to put aside 5% of that towards regional investment, as directed by the former Tri-County Planning Body. So I just wanted to ground everybody in that. So there are certainly complications, budgetary complications. We're currently working with our county partners. We've scheduled a number of planning sessions. We've had a couple of ready. We've got the next one coming up on Monday. And that's kind of the status of where we're at as a department right now.
Yeah, thanks. Can I ask a follow-up? Because I agree, I mean, obviously one of our 5 points was the RIF, and I know it's been one of the points of conversation that the council really wants to see. So I appreciate the staff perspective. I also would love to lean on our legal perspective. I think what we tried to do was create this kind of like roadmap, because my understanding is that in order to change that, we would need to change maybe IGAs or some kind of agreement. And so creating this like 1 year plus process where we could collaboratively build consensus, bring the RPUC to say, yes, we agree that this one area, and will kind of give us all like, oh yeah, this is obvious, we should work on this. And then hopefully the counties would be friendly and receptive in making that edit. My question, and maybe not worry, but question is, if we were to be much more aggressive and say by spring or by this fall, how would that change the tenor of negotiate? I mean, you help negotiate, so you know how those things go. So can you help us understand from your perspective, Carrie or Shane?
Okay, all right, I'm green. Well, as Liam mentioned, they must allocate 5% to this regional fund. The IGAs currently say that the counties control that fund, so we would maybe need to further discuss that. And I know that the housing staff have been discussing with the counties, and there's been various discussions with Kristen. So I don't know I don't have the temperature taking of where the counties are on this issue, but currently the IGAs say that counties control that. They must allocate it, but then they control the fund currently, with the guidance of the Tri-County Planning Body.
Yeah. What steps would we need to take to change that from like a contractual basis?
Well, the parties would need to agree to change the IGA.
So all 3 counties would need to agree?
And, well, keep in mind, we have 3 separate IGAs with each county. So although they often come to the negotiating table collectively, technically they are 3 separate contracts.
Yeah, okay, great. So, all right, anyway, thank you. Because, my heart is where Councillor Lewis is. Like, I want to bring this in. But I was also, I think, trying to figure out the politics and the tactics of how we get there. So, I don't know. I would, maybe Councillor Lewis would, given some of the conversation we've had, I know that you think about this at length and how we create the conditions for us to do that. But just really welcome your thoughts and reflection so that we can also see how we can amend the language.
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. I think responding directly, I do not see a path in which if we give ourselves yet another year of spending as is, that we can say that the regional investments are truly regional. We've seen kind counties use some of the regional priorities to shift over some of their current spending into the RIF. So we're not truly regionalizing a lot, even though we've made some really fantastic foundational plans. They're not getting funded. And the trust exercise here of moving the Tri-County Planning Body into an oversight structure, I don't want to take the foot off the gas. And I think that's why I'm being a little bit more assertive in saying we shall move the fund over. And yeah, it's going to require us to assert ourselves and not open up a long process regarding IGA. Because remember, it took us 2 years to get IGAs.
Yeah.
We don't have 2 years to renegotiate this one part. We need urgency, and that is what I'm calling for here today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on the RIF while we're on the topic?
Councilor Nolan has her.
Go, Councilor Nolan, did you have a separate item or is this on the RIF?
Both, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, let's tackle the RIF if you would, please.
I concur with Councilor Lewis's comments about urgency and about being very clear that Metro wants to bring the entire program into a regional focus. We've all talked about that. And I have comments about that topic in a few moments. But with regard to the RIF, we can respect existing contracts that have been entered, but say no new contracts from tomorrow or another, a very soon date. All new contracts must follow the centralized and oversight of Metro and the committee, not independent appropriation by counties.
Shane, is that in our authority to do that?
I don't want to get too much into some legal analysis in a public forum. So there are options that we would consider.
Okay. Liam, go ahead.
Might add just an additional context. It's not just contracts that the counties are contending with, but paying for FTE within county staff as well. So just another additional piece of context.
Okay.
So just so I understand that obviously there would be implications to layoffs that are tied to that if it was to be brought back to Metro, hypothetically.
I mean, hypothetically, it depends on what the priority of the committee is and what the priority of Metro Council is. And if the priority was to remain the same, then you could potentially continue to fund those positions somehow.
Okay.
I'll give you a real world example.
Yeah,
and
thank
it's one of the most successful goals of the Tri-County Planning Body, and that's that healthcare homelessness integration. And we've really highlighted for you all the investment that we've made from our administrative funds to health share. But what the counties have spent some of their regional investment fund on are in-house FTE to support that work specifically for healthcare integration. Now, I'm not here defending or advocating, I'm just providing that additional context for you.
Thank you, that is actually really helpful.
Well, my intent here is to empower the RPOC to have as much influence over the regional system as much as possible, including, investments from the RIF. I'm hearing a lot of interest in exploring an expedited timeline. And I think maybe what we'll do over the next couple of weeks is we'll do some deeper analysis around the pros and cons of that and what impacts, unintended consequences there might be. So we'll bring that back in March, if that's okay with you all.
Yeah,
okay.
That's okay.
Let's move on then to Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You all have received independently from me suggested changes that I'd like to explain and put some context in and some basis for making those recommendations. First off is we have consistently as a group, this council, talked about moving this program to a regional perspective. I think that I can say everyone has been in agreement with that. And if I'm wrong about that, let me know. what I'm concerned about is that we don't have this, we don't share the same definition of a regional approach. And I suspect without more clarity in this resolution, the 20 some odd members of this committee also will not share the same notion of what regionalism means, and therefore they won't share the same idea of what success looks like. Which is why I proposed the edits or amendment to create a new first paragraph under the "Be it resolved" section, which states very clearly that Metro is requiring that this program be run from a regional perspective. I'd like to, you've heard me all talk about the human beings who are the subject of our efforts and our county partners' efforts and the nonprofit providers' efforts. But that we should think about human beings as human beings, whether they put their head down in Rockwood or in Cornelius or in Gladstone, outside of the comfort of walls and sanitation and other things. So, Mr. Chair, if you'd allow, to see if I misunderstand, my understanding of regionalism is exactly that this program is a program that has to be designed and implemented to serve every human being who's homeless in the region, wherever they exist. But I'd like to see if that's what everyone else's definition of a regional program is. Are we in agreement with that, or are there differences?
Okay, let's open it up for the conversation. And how do folks feel?
Thank you, Chair. I'll comment. I agree strongly with the idea of regionalism, but I think I would put a nuance on it, saying it's regionalism with local adaptability. Remember, particularly Clackamas County, but the other counties, Washington as well, deal with people who are outside of the jurisdiction of this particular regional program, and they may have ideas on how to deal with people out in these more rural areas that are not entirely covered by the kinds of things that we may cover in the regional approach. So I think it's a regional approach, but there are different conditions in each county and different demographics and different populations. So it has to be a regional approach with adaptability for local conditions. And so I would say that that's a nuance that we have to consider.
I would say that's not a nuance. I would say that's a substantive difference with what I described.
Okay.
But sponsors of the bill, how are you defining regionalism that you're trying to accomplish with this resolution?
There you go. All right, I'll go. I like the words you're saying, Counselor, but I mean, just to be super honest, I think I'm also trying to reconcile what I've also the legislative intent of the conversations that we've had in our work sessions. And my concern and my worry is that in the definition of regionalism that you're moving forward, or that we've talked about, it includes, decimating funding to Washington and Clackamas County. And there's language that is kind of very needs-based, and that to me is like sending signals to some really strong shifts in the framework of SHS entirely. Having said that, I would love to talk about that a little bit more in this forum, just because I do think that what Councilor Rosenthal is important. That is the measure that was passed, that there is a local adaptability. There is a a sense that we need to significantly improve regionalism through the lanes of which regionalism will thrive in this measure. But also, we have, Washington County, Clackamas County doing very important work, and I'm concerned about the potential consequences that we're not fully evaluating when we talk about a specific definition of that. So hopefully
With all
that's...
due respect, but Counselor, can you say that in English? I don't understand what you just said.
Okay. Let me try and repeat that in English, which is the language that I was speaking. That I'm concerned about some of the general essence of the language that in the amendments is that regionalism, I think we agreed regionalism is important, but what I'm concerned about is the discussions that we've had in the past and some of the language that I'm seeing here has an intention to shift the scope of SHS to take funding from Washington and Clackamas counties unfairly and without the proper process. That's really my sense here.
I think,
If I might follow up on that, does that mean, for example, looking at the language there, that we want, although we talk about a regional approach, we want to stick with a program that allocates $500 to Clackamas and Washington County to provide rent assistance, but in the same circumstance, a different county, Multnomah, for example, has only $200 to achieve the same thing for that family? Is that what we mean by regionalism or by local exceptions?
I think that those numbers are not proportional to the actual allocation.
Well, I think they are.
So I think to what you're sharing, I think that's exactly my concern with that definition, because it's trying to relitigate a much deeper, more essential piece to the SHS program that I think is beyond the intent of the legislation that Councilor Huang and I worked on, and I think the legislative direction that the Metro Council has given to RPOC. There is a huge amount of work. There are things that we want. We all want to talk about the formula. We all want to talk about who's getting what. Is it fair because of where homelessness exists? We parked that conversation once we decided to not go to the ballot. And, I'm just concerned that we are trying to bring that conversation. And I feel like if we move forward with that conversation, we will only further disintegrate trust and the ability for this regional oversight committee to do very important work in these areas that we are outlining.
Thanks. Thanks for your patience, Mr. Chair. If we could hear from other folks.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd really like to see a system where our compassion individually doesn't end at a county border. And that's one sense that I really got. And I think that's the issue we're struggling to with Councilor Gonzalez is like, we feel three systems right now. And if, you're on the wrong side of a border, your services and the compassion I give is different. And that's something that I've seen. I also don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all strategy for every county. So I do think there needs to be, the ability for implementers to work in the way that, best, works within their community. So I think we're trying to straddle that balance. But I do think we're trying to get at the resource allocation piece later on in the framework, where we do want a new funding framework to be discussed and agreed upon, where all these concerns are kind of shared. So I think that it's kind of like, yes, overall we want that regional system, but what that system looks like is actually up for conversation. I'm actually going to ask Liam too. Like, Liam, do you have a definition for what a regional system is?
Start if you want.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, counselors. For the record, I'm Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the SHS Division Director. I think a lot of the programmatic themes that I'm hearing you all discuss are a reform that you all passed last December around our administrative rules that really, these rules are going to provide definitions and actionable standards for the policy directions that we set forth. I think from the beginning, at the onset of SHS, you all did pass council legislation and council policy that indicated what it looked like to build a regional system of care. But I think there could have been more that we could have done from the very beginning to be really clear on what we meant when we said a regional system of care. What does that look like? What does that feel like for the participants that are experiencing homelessness, and how do they access services? So I think you all doubling down on that reform last December and passing the legislation that makes it really clear when we say these are the SHS funded programming, this is what we mean when we say regional. There can be still that local nuance, which is exactly what we're working right now with our county partners in terms of implementing the program. But at its core, these are the core standards and definitions that if you're using SHS funds, it doesn't matter if someone is experiencing homelessness in Rockwood, like Councilor Nolan said, or in Cornelius, they could still expect to receive the same quality and standards of services. So just wanted to take the opportunity on the programmatic side to let you all know that that is work that the division right now is working really hard to implement to ensure that we have those regional standards and definitions and procedures across the region.
And do you think we have shared understanding and buy-in from all our partners on that?
I think we're getting there for sure. I mean, I think what we've learned is that for something like permanent supportive housing, which is you all remember, it's the long-term stability housing and wraparound services for households with higher acuities. We have learned that that is maybe being implemented in different ways. So I think right now what we're in the process of understanding is what's the through line? What is the, when we say permanent supportive housing, what can we expect across the region? And I think for the most part, we are seeing buy-in, and counties are leaning into that conversation to be able to codify these standards and definitions. But it's just a work in progress, and then it'll be for the other program areas that we fund as well.
So if I might, does that mean changing the distribution formula for funding?
Okay. Again, for the record, this is Liam Frost, Interim Director for the Housing Department, he, him, his pronouns. I think we're looking at resolving the startup acceleration of the 3 counties and now looking at a more rational system. Councilor Nolan, you put on the table a system wherein anybody that is homeless is able to receive services. That is a big conversation, because with the limited resources that we have, if that is a guarantee that as a system we want to make, we're looking at diluting best practices and leaning more into triage than long-term stability. That's a big conversation to have. I want to affirm that where I fundamentally agree with you, and what Yesenia just pointed out, was, to me, regionalism is anybody can go and try and get the same level of care no matter which county that they're in. I also want to add another layer of complexity to this too, which is almost entirely this work is done by nonprofit service providers, contractors. So even within Multnomah County, you might get a different set of services from one contractor to another, or in Washington County and Clackamas County and so on. But right now, what our department is focused on is ensuring that we have a level of services that are similar or almost the same in each county. We're far away from that. But that is a very different thing than saying we are going to provide services for every person that's experiencing homelessness. I just wanted to make that clarification too.
Is that not our goal? Is that not what we promised the voters?
Well, I wasn't part of the campaign. I wasn't making any promises to voters at the time. But what I'm talking about as an administrator is that we have a limited amount of funding to meet a growing and exponentially growing need. Evictions last month, I think you all saw the headlines, shot up again. We can't control for evictions. What we can control for is a more rational system.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I just want to start by acknowledging that when we asked for counselors to restate what they said, it's probably best to ask for them to remove jargon or to use simplified language. That might cause less harm. But in terms of being really blunt about what regionalism means to me in this context, This is not the place to have the funding allocation fight and conversation. I think it's really important to talk about the standards. And when I think about what this program actually funds, the largest and most successful piece of the program is the voucher system. The local vouchers are worth their weight in gold. And we don't have portability across the 3 counties for those vouchers yet. So until we have a path to that, talking about what we call our systems of care, and are they more recovery oriented or are they more towards housing first? Nobody does any of that purely. So we can have those philosophical and frankly political discussions. But what I want to prioritize is if we have local vouchers, they're regional vouchers. And until we have that as our North Star, the rest of it is a little bit of a political angle that doesn't achieve results on the ground right away, like regionalizing those vouchers would. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy President Wong. First off, Councilor Gonzalez, Councilor Wong, thank y'all so much for the intent, the spirit of bringing regionalism to this conversation and to this body and setting some boards around it. Listen, I mean, if we're talking regionalism, we've litigated this many, many times through retreats, through work sessions. And I will say this, and I'm gonna say it plainly so everybody can understand, even Multnomah County does not hit every area it's supposed to. Because if we're talking about local systems and adaptability, they have failed because they don't come out in the East County the way they should. And this is a mechanism that will, hopefully, this resolution will push this body that is forming to do that. Right now, we have a system that only is concerned about where affluent people live, while poor people continue to live on top of poor people with no infrastructure or no investment. I appreciate this conversation because it daylights a lot of what we have to talk about as a council within ourselves. But I'm gonna say it again plainly, like the way the program is designed currently, it doesn't meet the moment. The way we are trying to put the amendments in place to make it work, we have to try. Because if we don't, and we continue to maintain the status quo, then we're gonna continue to fail. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully we can understand that.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question. I think this is a very important discussion, first of all. This is not a trivial process. And I think the more discussion we have, the closer we get to what we need. My question is very straightforward in a sense. 2 of the big issues that we have to face, or that we have to face in terms of developing a regional plan, are the A-B allocation and also the allocation of funds according to where they are generated. These are 2 of the big things that are currently limited. Now, in reading this resolution, I wasn't quite clear where the charge was for the RPOC to evaluate those and make recommendations or potential recommendations on that. So maybe you could clarify it for me. It's sort of implied, I think, in number 4 or number 5, where it talks about the regional regional performance, but I wasn't entirely clear that that was a charge that was given them.
Could I just answer that question directly? In the work plan that you all approved in December, in a list of priorities that have been asked for the RPOC to consider, review spending for populations A and B is featured in the list of priorities.
Okay.
So we fully expect for the RPOC to tackle the spending on population A and B.
Yeah, I fully expect them to have to tackle that also, but I just didn't see that specifically called out in the resolution. And so it's a little hard. Keep in mind, this is a resolution that's sort of a public document, and so clarity and simplicity sometimes are things that we need to be explicit.
Thank you, Councilor. When I worked on this, I actually went through the work plan we already adopted, just to make sure that we didn't have redundancies as much as possible. So this was called out on something we voted on in December, and this is supposed to be an add-on to that. So I guess we could make that more clear, but I was just balancing the redundancy versus new content.
I didn't say it was easy.
We want a concise resolution, but thank you. Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That was one of my topics, and I appreciate the discussion. I thought it was healthy for us to hear different perspectives. I come away from that conversation with the conclusion that we, 6 of us, don't share the same interpretation of the words on the page. And if that's the case, then I think we can't expect that 20 plus people appointed to the RPOC coming from various different administrative, political, professional perspectives will share the same definition unless we give them more clarity. So if people don't agree with my interpretation, I urge the drafters of this to be more clear, and as Councillor Lewis said, write it for the general public instead of for acronym junkies, so that everybody understands it. I have 2 other points that I wanted to bring up. One is the resolution, and that is the draft resolution that we're discussing today and the resolution that we adopted in December, do not declare an end objective of this program. And I think both to give guidance to the members of the RPOC and to earn trust with the voters, we should say that this program aims to achieve functional zero, and that's a term of jargon, I understand, or end homelessness by a certain date or within a certain time frame. Or the voters will expect that it is being treated as an ongoing bureaucracy instead of a program reacting urgently to the human catastrophe of people sleeping outside year-round in our communities. And I'd like to raise that question. Do we agree that the purpose of the Supportive Housing Services Program is to achieve functional zero, which is a creation of the group referenced in the resolution about Built for Zero? Or do we not think that that's the objective of the program? And then I have one other question about what's on the KEI's list.
Okay, colleagues, thoughts on functional zero?
Can I offer something while y'all are thinking
Please.
about this? Metro Council, created a SHS oversight committee to conduct oversight on behalf of you all, and it's and actually it's a bit of a spoiler alert because they'll be coming on Thursday to present their regional report. And the way they've interpreted, the policy that you all have set forth in your work plan and other governance documents, they haven't been thinking about it per se as functional zero, but they have been thinking about what does it look like for SHS to build a social safety net of services for households. Our last meeting, the co-chair of the SHS Oversight Committee, they compared the system that we're building here almost to like a hospital system, where we understand that we won't ever be able to solve for all of the illnesses and things that might lead someone to engage in the medical system. And even though it doesn't translate perfectly over to this system, because of the many upstream factors that we're working with, disinvestment with the behavioral health system, rents going up, income staying at where they're at. The Oversight Committee really focused their regional report on, I don't think that SHS will be able to solve homelessness. I think what we can do with this very flexible funding source is work to better ensure that this social safety net that we are building in our region, how do we maximize that, make it more efficient? How do we leverage other funding sources to ensure that we are all working collectively to build this social safety net that meets people where they're at? So I think I just wanted to make sure that you all knew this as you were having this conversation of this is what the oversight committee that you all, are directing to provide oversight as currently under our current governance is thinking about as they're unpacking some of these really extensive and complicated questions.
And Yesenia, has any American city achieved functional zero?
I would have to double check with you, but I don't think it's you achieve it and then you arrive, it's an ongoing thing. But I know that some cities have gotten pretty close to it, but then it's an iterative process that they're checking in on almost daily to see who the next person is. But I can certainly get you more data on where some of the cities are that have reached closer to that threshold.
Smaller cities with smaller homeless populations definitely have. I think Salt Lake City was waving a flag that they had done that at least 5 years ago. And then as far as bigger cities are concerned, Houston, Texas has reduced the number of folks experiencing homelessness. And that's often attributed to the fact that Houston has much more flexible housing, zoning, and land use laws that can accommodate the placements of homeless folks, whereas it's much more difficult in places along the West Coast, like here.
And in your opinion, what beyond SHS would it take for us to get to functional zero?
I think Yesenia touched on a few of those. I want to just double down on SHS is necessary to end homelessness, but not sufficient. We need to make sure that folks have a living wage. We need to make sure that folks have access to behavioral health care before they develop high acuity behavioral needs. We need to make sure that jobs are sustainable and that the gig economy isn't where white collar workers end up and then compressing folks even further into poverty. I mean, we're talking about big societal things right now. I think specific to the Portland region, the fact that we're in a local recession, unlike other regions, that's really tripping us up. And that is a huge thing that we need to solve for right now to, I can't think of a better metaphor, but stanch the bleeding, as it were.
So you're saying it's necessary, but not sufficient?
Agreed. Yes.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
Liam,
It wasn't when the
how
special
much
was
do,
crafted, it was supposed to be complementary to federal and state.
Could you repeat that? Sorry, Councilor Simpson.
When this measure was crafted, these funds were meant to be complementary to federal and state resources, which are out the door now.
That's 100% true. And in 2019, the local economy looked very, very different than it does right now in 2026.
Right, so your comment about it solving homelessness on its own, we're really sitting on a one-legged stool now.
Correct.
If we had to really put it into perspective.
And we can shift our priorities depending on what the RPOC would like to prioritize, depending on this council, and then also depending on our county partners as well. I want to let you know that we serve this council. We will shift priorities as needed, but we will always provide context and information that will help you make those decisions.
Councilor Nolan?
thanks, Mr. Chair. Liam, do Houston or Salt Lake or any of the other cities that have gotten close to functional zero have a version of SHS funding?
The closest comparison we have are San Francisco and Los Angeles. What Houston has that we don't is a much more centralized coordination. Their continuum of care is, I believe it's the continuum of care that really has authority over the whole homeless
How is
system.
that funded there?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, thanks. And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the third point I wanted to talk with the council about is measuring and using as a key performance indicator the homeless population, and actually population A and population B. Even if we conclude that we can't get to functional zero, I believe the public expects to know whether we're making progress each year or whether we're treading water. And I think it would be useful for both the Metro Council to have that information and the RPOC to have it, because it might prompt some changes in priorities or programs or methods if what we're doing isn't achieving lowering the number of homeless. And if we don't know it, we can't adjust to it.
Fair enough.
Councillor Nolan,
Questions?
we have included the number of folks experiencing homelessness in the key environmental indicators. What we have not included is it broken down by population, population B. If council wants to do that, we're obviously happy to do so.
All right. Any other questions on that? Comments? Councilor Rosenthal?
But I'll just make a comment that I've made before, that I think there's not just population and population A and population B. There's population C, people that are transient, particularly the youth cohort, which I think falls across both lines and deserves its own special category. But that's one point. If we're still on this subject, I have another question clarification that maybe somebody can offer me.
What?
We talk a lot about KPIs, and I understand we have a whole bunch of things in terms of throughput and transition. I was a little confused about KEIs because we really haven't talked about them much. And so some clarification on that would be necessary, and couldn't they not be included in KPIs? I mean, we created another category that just requires extra explanation.
I'm happy to answer that question.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilor Rosenthal. The reason why we proposed and Council approved the key environmental indicators is that they are key data points that impact the system, but the system does not get to control. So we've included total number of evictions, people experiencing homelessness, system inflow and outflow. Those are things that the SHS system do not get to control. They get to control outflow, obviously, and that's a KPI. And so the key performance indicator is supposed to tell us how we are performing as a system. The key environmental indicators are supposed to provide contextual data points so that we can predict how it's going to impact the system and eventually adjust a few points. So for example, if we can predict that evictions are going to increase threefold, then we want to provide the committee with that information, provide Metro Council with that information, and maybe there is some reprioritization, for example, around that. I suspect that the KEIs category is going to evolve over time quite rapidly. I think a lot of folks are going to have input on what that looks like. We expect that. But it was important to us to delineate what we can control for and what we cannot control for.
Do the KEIs include, for example, temperature extremes?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Some additional thoughts. I mean, just to bring it back to the 5 points that Councillor Huang and I worked on. We talked about the RIF, some metrics. I know that in our conversations with partners, we were really talking about how we're entering this critical phase where we need to optimize our system as much as possible. I think that this helps us do that. As we're talking about data and KPIs and how important it is to kind of recast the set of what is it that we're building towards. I mean, I'm remembering in our initial work plan, we told folks that we were going to help 5,000 people, connect them to permanent supportive housing, and then 10,000 people with, general support. And the hard truth for us to swallow is we already have hit those numbers.
Pretty much.
Right? Halfway into the measure. And so maybe we need to have a work session as a council, because everyone, we love to talk about what happened in 2020, like what is it that we actually inherited, because this was not developed, this measure was not developed by public policy, I would say professionals, and also implementers and government professionals that would need to implement this into bureaucracy. I see it more as it was like blue sky thinking and, great work to generate a resource. But the goals that we set, we've hit, but we do not feel like we've been successful. And so this KPI work is going to be, I think, really critical and essential for us to determine that. But anyway, I just wanted to lean into that. I just keep hearing conversation about what it is that we promised to voters in 2020. It seems that there's a whole bunch of perspectives about what that is. I think it might be helpful for us as an agency to just ground us in this is what Metro did in the last few weeks before we brought this in-house and then referred it. I think that'd be really helpful just to ground us all.
Origin story?
Yeah, an origin story, but like an official origin, because it was crowded by community advocates that carried it. It was then brought into Metro, and then it was deployed 3-4 weeks after into a campaign in which a lot of things were said that also didn't necessarily connect directly to the legislation and what we said we were going to do. So I think there's like all of these layers of what is the truth about what we said we were going to do. And I think that I'm feeling it's very important for us to understand where we came from and where we've been as we also try and figure out where we're trying to go. So I would appreciate that. Maybe we have more conversation about that in the next few weeks.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. And I'll just note that Liam and I and members of the Housing Department aren't coming back next Tuesday. We have a work session with you all to talk about SHS goals, KPIs, KEI. So we'll do a further deep dive in terms of where we've been. We can certainly bring some of that 2019, 2020 context that was really like, a lot of those numbers were looking at what our current state was and projecting out the need. I don't think we ever really anticipated, the lasting impacts of the pandemic and so many of the other societal contexts have really shifted. So we can certainly bring that into that presentation, but I just wanted to affirm that, we do have some time scheduled with you all to further dive into where these next 5 years of SHS are headed with our new interim and 5-year goals.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal, do you have another thought?
Oh, go ahead, Mike. I always have a question I could answer. And actually, my question would be this, and it gets to what Councilor Nolan said regarding, the functional zero. Have the counties or has anybody evaluated what level of funding we would need? I mean, you can't reach functional zero unless you have the homes to put people in. So what level of funding would we need to provide sufficient homes within the next 5 years? And what level of funding would we need? I mean, remember, the SHS is a limited funding. It never purported to be complete funding for everything. So has anybody estimated what the level of funding would be regionally in order to achieve these goals? In other words, we have a three-legged cart here. We can't break speed records very easily.
Can I chime in on that? I think now that we're having conversation, I think what I've heard from staff is that it's not just how much money you pump into the system.
It's not.
There's structural changes that need to happen across a whole bunch of areas. So housing, how we build housing, probably implicates our statewide land use system and how we either support certain goals or not, behavioral health, how we integrate with healthcare. If we truly want to solve this problem, we need to look at all of those things, because otherwise we're just helping people manage a very, very difficult part of their life. But the structural things, it just continues to be this cycle that happens within that. So I recognize that, and I feel that call to action from our staff as well, that we need to be much more expansive. And our December work plan, we also talked at length about how we want RPOC to develop a stronger state and federal strategy so that the region speaks with one voice when it comes to addressing some of these deeper structural issues. So I also don't really want to come out and talk to voters and say, hey, we actually want to double the amount that we're collecting for SHS, because as we've seen from the polling and things like that, I don't think people feel like we are spending it well, right? So I think we have a lot of trust to rebuild, which is, I think, what we need to do. But anyway, I just wanted to respond in good faith, kind of what I'm thinking about that question of more money. Could we have more money? Sure. I'm sure we could help more people. But we also need to look at the more structural changes in our broader society.
Totally agree.
Yeah. But anyway, Liam, anything else that you guys want to add?
To answer your question directly, to my mind, I'm not sure that anybody has done a full study on what it would take to fund a system that would currently house the folks who are currently experiencing homelessness. And if one were to do that, that would be somewhat helpful. The somewhat piece of it is that there are always going to be more and more people falling into homelessness. It's not a static population, it's a population that moves. So Councilor Gonzalez said it better than I could around the structural pieces.
Some pieces of it, it seems that we can estimate to some extent. I mean, we know, for example, certain aspects of federal funding have been cut and no longer there, that were some people were relying on. So we could say, well, this piece is no longer there, therefore more funding to satisfy that piece would be necessary in some sense. But you're right, it doesn't get to the whole thing. It doesn't get to the structural changes.
Those are the primary impacts, and then the secondary impacts of reducing SNAP benefits or healthcare benefits, which would then put pressure on folks, and there's no accounting for that in the SHS system.
Agree. Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to speak up with a point of disagreement about the statewide land use system being implicated in our homeless response. The best places to build and house people are where they're already connected to good urban services, including transportation. So I don't think UGB expansion is our way out of this. I do, however, think that there's one really critical tool around accessing units that are already built, and that is looking at how we can further buy down rents, particularly those that are at the 60% level and unfilled apartments owned and operated by community-based nonprofits. And we have a lot of work to do about really accounting for how many of them there are out there. We've obviously seen the news coverage, but I would like to see Metro as a convener and potentially convene the table with the banks to start buying down these rents and get people into those apartments.
Councilor Nolan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We also know that subsidized housing, publicly subsidized housing, of what we call affordable housing, is not going to be a solution in and of itself to the issue of homelessness in our region, as it isn't a solution in any other city that I'm aware of. Liam and Yesenia might have information that I don't. But if we want to talk about the systems, we should look ourselves in the mirror or have another conversation about how much we're willing to use what regulatory authorities we have or what collaboration authorities we have with cities, state, and counties that could influence the market rate of housing, because we have to have unsubsidized workforce housing if we're going to solve the problem of homelessness in the region. We will not fill it all, even if we convince the voters to support another affordable housing bond measure, which doesn't say we shouldn't do that. But that by itself, 3,900, 5,000 housing units, and we know that there are 18,000 or so homeless people in the region. We have to put pressure on, put regulations on the private sector and market rate housing.
Well, it seems like it's never sufficient, or is it sufficient? Necessary, but not sufficient on its own. We got a lot of those today. Great, well, I wanna appreciate this conversation today. I think we daylighted a lot of things that we need to talk more about. Just for me, I'm really thinking about, taking this limited resource that we have and relieving as much human suffering as possible. I think that's the overall intent. But we're also doing, what we can to build trust with our taxpayers and making sure that they see that, they're getting value for their investment. And I think we're focused on the kind of those two goals, and I think a lot of the elements here in the resolution are hoping to achieve that through discussion, consensus building, and conversations like this in RPOC. So I've heard a lot of feedback today. I think we're gonna go back and look more into the timeline for the RIF. I'm gonna try real hard to come up with a workable definition for what regionalism looks like. I think we all got our own ideas. I don't know if that everyone will land on one definition, but I think that concept of regionalism everyone supports. So, we'll do our best to come up with some language on that. And looking at some of the dates and how we can be more ambitious. And maybe, circling back with our external partners as well. So I know we got a little more research. I'm gonna invite Kristen up. So I know a lot of folks have their own language amendments and things like that. And I think just for next steps to best comply with all our ethics rules, I'm gonna have Kristen describe how we do that.
Yes, thank you again. For the record, Kristen Dennis, I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief of Staff to Metro Council. Councilors, if you have any, as we move forward to next steps, if you have any amendments, please feel free to send them to me. We'll work through how to best set up your next meeting to discuss in the first reading so that you can go through all of those. And so we'll, council staff will work through setting that discussion up. So please send me any sort of amendments you'd like to have brought up.
Great, thank you, Kristen. Okay, I also heard a request for another work session on
The origin story?
the past and the present and the future. Okay, with that, we'll wrap up this segment and we'll move on to, thank you all, move on to COO Communications.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong. For today's update, I just wanted to give a little signal boost for the Nature Neighborhoods Community Choice Design Workshop taking place Thursday, February 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Robert Libke, hope I said that right, Public Safety Building in Oregon City. This workshop is an opportunity for community members and advocates, design professionals, and staff from local cities and park districts to take community parks ideas and turn them into project plans. The project plans created at this workshop will then be voted on by community members across Clackamas County. So if you know anyone who would be interested, pass the word. You can find more information on oregonmetro.gov/events. I also wanted to give a gentle reminder to all Metro staff that HR is ramping up this year's annual required forms process. All Metro employees are required to complete an ethics disclosure form, and employees in telework eligible positions are also required to submit an updated telework agreement. There are some process changes this year, so I would encourage all to make sure that you read through the communications from HR and your department leadership so that you can ensure that you're filling out and submitting your forms correctly and in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Councilor Communications.
The festival, the dinner.
I attended with Councilor Rosenthal the Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year party at Excellent Cuisine on Sunday night. We had an excellent 10-course meal joined by many of our staff. So I wish everyone a happy Lunar New Year. I brought in some snacks and treats that are in the council office, so please grab some.
Yeah, it was a good event attended by a lot of people, including the governor, who made good remarks. So it was very good. I just have one thing. I attended the Hillsborough State of the City address last Friday. It was a positive address, somewhat I wouldn't say combative exactly, but somewhat defiant in terms of dealing with the populations in the Hillsborough area that are threatened by a governmental action, and Mayor Pace was very strong on that regard. The theme was unity, community, and unity, and she had a very positive view of the future for Hillsborough. So it was a nice event.
Yeah, if I could add, I also attended the State of the City, and I think Metro was mentioned 5 to 6 times in terms of partnership, and I was very touched by seeing all of the things that we've achieved together on transportation, on housing, on, jobs, you name it. I think it's really special to take that time and see what our partners think about the way that we show up for them, especially in times where it feels like so many things are maybe not going as well as we would all like at the regional level, that we've done a lot of really good things recently. So thank you, Councilor.
Great. Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for February 26th at 10:30 a.m. Thanks.
Recording stopped.